reality.
Normally what we find in governance, so you have your strategic plan, very simple, but the complexities are built into your policies.
Exactly.
To serve a particular recruitment. So
Exactly.
This is what we find in politics doing to South African policy making.
Yeah.
So you have a degree of complexity, but the complexity should be higher up, but instead it is further down.
Exactly. But this is then transforming strategic planning into strategic management.
Yes.
And this is a science in its own right. Strategic management is different from strategic planning. So you have your strategic plan, but how can you manage the strategy is a complex issue. You have to manage culture, you have to manage structure, you have to, like, the strategic management is how to transform the strategic plan into the reality on the ground. To apply.
In fact, there's a huge caveat that we need to unlearn with the strategic planning in itself, for example.
Yeah.
The Americans claim the history of strategic planning, the Americans claim was first applied in the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And in the 1990s, it hit South Africa like a storm. And at that time, we already found that the notion of strategic planning is a trajectory that takes a society to a warlike society.
Yeah.
Which is where the US is finding itself now. South Africa is following in that footsteps as a funnel, as very
Yeah. If I may quickly perhaps cover this slide as well before we go, that has to do, since we mentioned strategic management, and not to postpone that because we have some material to cover, which is basically the applied decision making. If you're going to make decisions in an organization, you're going to study that, there's a number of dilemmas that you will face. And I'm giving here a number of examples of these dilemmas. One of them is the crisis management versus long-term management. Are you managing crises or you're managing long-term objectives? Most of the Islamic organizations in Islamic world manage crises. They don't manage long-term. So we don't have salaries for the personnel, so let us fundraise so that by the end of the month we have salaries. But what is our long-term financial plan? That is totally out of the room. They are saying something about us, and there is a newspaper article, so we have to issue something. Two guys are fighting in the masjid, so let us solve the problem. She told me you're bad, and I told her you're good. Yeah, exactly. She pinched me, and I cursed her, and so forth. So the crisis management versus the long-term plan, versus ignoring all of this and looking at the long term. How can I serve the organization on the long term? Let alone the country. Like here, we're not talking even countries, but this applies basically to what they call grand policy making. We have a course on that once, which is country management. You know, some people manage countries by crisis management. Oh, so there is rain, so let's deal with the rain. Oh, there is a fire, let's deal with the fire. There is a flood, let's deal with the flood. And they manage the country based on crisis management. And this is suicide for the country and for the regime that is managing. Value of the leadership versus the value of the public. If you're a leader, sometimes your values contradict with the values of the public. And therefore you have to really navigate not just the crisis versus long term, but your values versus the values of the public. Are you going to enforce your values? And these are the values that we need to embrace, or are you going to go with playing the tunes that the public asks for? When you play the tunes that the public asks for, and you are a reactionary organization, then you will probably have your career all right as a leader, and you will probably be able to do some fundraising, but you're not achieving the objectives of the organization because your values are driven by the public and your activities are driven by the public. But you should lead the public. You're not supposed to play the tunes that the public need. Even though, yes, you have to be popular and all that. But this is now the dilemma. Policies versus politics. There is a difference between the policies that you take in order to achieve the common good and the politics as in power. The power equation is very different from the public good equation. The public good equation continues regardless of the power equation. We see countries around the world where policy is the same, even though the politics change. The Americans go between the left and the right, between the Obamas of America and the Trumps of America, And America is doing the same thing. The same good old killing, and the same good old economics, and the same good old, it's the same. Despite the face, could be a nice, educated face like Obama's, and African as well, I mean, to make it nice. Or you have a guy like Trump, who is really not educated, but the system is the system, and because the policy is the same. The major academies are doing the same work. The major institutions are doing the same work, because the faces at the top are not as important. Well, if you give a second term to the same guy, then he's probably going to be able to change some levels in government. But in the first round, 4 years, you cannot change anything really in government. You're governing from the top. You're a spokesperson. The government under you is not listening to you. They're listening to the previous 8 years of your government. So policies versus politics is very important. Current versus future generation. You want to do whatever you can so that you have growth, and then the next 100 years Earth disappears. That's fine, you can do that. Or you think about the future generation. That yes, we're not going to have budgets for the next 5 years, but we're going to invest on the waqf or whatever, and then the next 5 years we will have better budget. Individual versus public concern. There's particular individuals who are powerful in your organization. Are you going to make them an exception, or are you going to make everybody equal in your thought? Current slogans versus changing them. Be careful what slogans and what values you preach, because 5 years from now you could change the values. You're making the Sunnah Shia thing a huge thing, and then 10 years from now you're saying, okay, the Sunnah Shia are two schools of Islam. Why? Because politics changed and many things changed, and you're no longer thinking like that. So see what values you are setting in the people's minds, because you're committing suicide if 10 years from now you're really going to take the public back. The public is not going to go back with you. The public will tell you, oh, but they're kuffar, how can we, and so forth, just for an example. Transparency or public support, and these are two different things. The more transparent you are, the less public support you have, because the public differs. Everybody has their own opinion, and therefore you need to balance this. Self-absorption or exporting experience. Are you going to export your experience to other mosques and organizations and schools and so on, or are you going to focus on your school or your mosque or your organization and make sure that you do well? You want to export the revolution, or you want to take care of whatever government you're responsible for now? Mission versus the leadership survival, which is finally, you have to decide whether you want to survive or you want to serve the mission. And if you serve the mission, you're not going to survive. and it is a compromise that you have to make. You see, it's very important to look at it this way, and make sure my recommendation to you, which I will be saying as a final thing today, it's a day full of trouble from me. I would say serve the mission, and the survival, just tawakkal Allah, and Allah will provide for you. Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam.